Now, on to another story that's really been topical for the past few days, and that is the story of the ANC, again, having reiterated its serious about rooting out corruption. President Cyril Ramaphosa said yesterday, penning a letter to ANC members conceding the governing party is deeply implicated in corruption allegations. He's urged members facing corruption allegations to step aside from their duties while their cases are being heard. ANC Secretary General Magashule has also requested his colleagues declare their financial interests and any pending police investigations. This follows a decision by the National Executive Committee that the party's officials oversee an audit of members facing charges or disciplinary cases. ANC Spokesperson Pule Mabe joins us now via Skype. Mr. Mabe, a very good morning to you. One of our viewers this morning tweeting, saying that Bongani Bongo is still a member of parliament, and yet we making a big case about the former mayor of eThekwini, Ms. Gumede. What sort of responses have you gotten to this letter since it came out?
Well, morning, Desiree, and morning to your good viewers. Of course, there has been a mixed reaction. Society out there expect the ANC to act decisively. They can no longer tolerate what they term lip service. They want to see action right through. The fact that the president of the African National Congress has penned a letter out to members, which follows a decision of the National Executive Committee to draw a line, especially on issues of corruption. This alone expresses the seriousness through which we in the leadership are treating these matters. The Secretary General of the ANC, as you rightfully pointed, has already sent out a letter to our structures calling on them to be able to declare their own financial interests, especially those that are public representatives serving as MPs, MPLs, or even at the local council level. This is consistent with the decision we took that officials must conduct such an audit and then even empower officials to go on and enlist services of those of our members with the requisite legal expertise, including working together with our own National Disciplinary Committee as well as the Integrity Commission to look into all of these things. This is an expression of seriousness through which the ANC is acting on these matters. Of course, where there are cadres that are charged and appearing before the court of law, there is a process internally in the organization to accord such members an opportunity to make a representation to the relevant structures of organization. Officials are compiling reports of all of those cases, and at the right time, they will be able to brief the National Executive Committee on the sort of actions that need to be undertaken.
I suppose what the South African public and perhaps ANC members are grappling with at the moment is why would the president write out an open letter to members such as this one and make such a demand when the very same demand was made at the 54th conference in 2017 and decisions were taken on it to stem corruption?
Well, Desiree, the ANC must continue to talk about these issues. You'd also know yourselves that post the 54th National Conference, a lot has already happened. We have had now, we are dealing with COVID-19. Already you have got various law enforcement agencies circling around what has come to be known as COVID-19 corruption. There is no way that when some of these events play themselves out, the ANC or its leadership would not remind members of the kind of resolve we made at the 54th National Conference. Every time we ought to refer to resolutions, remind our members that we are guided by this in between now and the next conference of the African National Conference. When we ultimately hand over this organization to its rightful owners, the members of the ANC, we who are in the leadership must be able to say that when there were cases of councillors who were stealing food parcels from the poor meant to fight COVID-19, these are the kind of actions we taken. When there were allegations to those within our ranks who were found to be in the wrong as it related to our fight against the pandemic. These are the actions that were taken. But effectively, these are the things that we shall have done. Remember, Osdesri, one of the things that we said we needed to do, which is expressed in the letter by the president, is that we ought to conduct lifestyle audit of public servants, because we have rightfully identified the terrain of supply chain to be one terrain that tends to facilitate this unwanted corruption. So it's very important that public servants, whether they serve within the supply chain committees or not, there is a lifestyle audit conducted there. But we also said that procurement must be done in the public space. Members of the public must be able to come out and take place and participate in the procurement of goods and services by government. They can do this just by way of oversight. And we must commend the Gauteng provincial government. They have already rolled out the open procurement system that allows members of the public to participate in such. We expect this to become a culture across institutions of state. And this is the point that the president is emphasizing.
What do you say to the sentiment that the reason why the president felt the need to reach out publicly to members is because there was disagreement within the NEC meeting about being decisive about dealing with corruption?
Well, I can tell you now, I happen to sit in the National Executive Committee. There was greater consensus on the sort of things and measures that we are expected to take. That's why it was the NEC statement of the 4th of August that said we are drawing a line. And what did we mean? We meant that we needed to then outline the kind of measures and actions that are going to be taken to show members of society, including members of the African National Congress, that we are serious about fighting corruption. There are already steps that are being undertaken. Now, it cannot be possible that when there are disagreements, why are we moving with greater speed to implement resolutions of that National Executive Committee? We do not owe it to anyone. We owe it to ourselves. We must show boldness in terms of how we fight corruption.
So now there's two parallel issues. One is COVID-19 corruption. The other one is historic corruption, which I said one of our viewers was referring to, about Bongani Bongo. There's Faith Mutambi, who was Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister, accused of leaking cabinet minutes to the Guptas. David Masondo, allegedly abusing state resources in a domestic dispute. There's multiple issues and multiple members. Have you made a decision as to who you are going to target and which kind of, how are you going to approach this in terms of legal properness?
Well, Osdesri, the efforts that are being undertaken by the African National Congress are not targeted at certain individuals. We are dealing with the notion of corruption broadly. And we are not separating COVID-19 from all other issues in the organization that ought to be attended to. We have given the officials the responsibility to conduct an audit. We are confident in the ability of the officials to be able to report back to the National Executive Committee on the work that they shall have done. Yourselves in the media, when there are issues coming out of that process which require that we come back and communicate, we'll definitely do so. The ANC is not shy to talk about issues, even the difficult ones that involve its own cadres.
So this letter detailing certain steps that can be taken, implement without delay the resolutions of the 54th conference, people who fail to give acceptance, explanation, or no voluntary step down while they face disciplinary action. The letter is penned to the member of the African National Congress. How are members supposed to respond to this letter? Are they responding as individual members of the African National Congress? Are they responding through their branches? How is this going to work? Is there a system to this?
Well, members of the ANC, when they join the African National Congress, they enter into an oath of allegiance, that they are joining the organization voluntarily. They submit themselves to the policies of the organization, that they are going to do the best of their endeavor to make sure that they participate in the full life of organization. What does full life mean? It means working to implement those of our resolutions that shall have been agreed upon at conference. The president's writing of a letter amplifies decisions of our own National Executive Committee meeting. You would also know that in terms of the ANC constitution, the president has got a duty to pronounce on policy from time to time. Now, resolutions of conference are at the core of our own policy undertakings. Now, it is not unusual that the president of the ANC will act in this way. And as the custodian of those resolutions, the Secretary General of the ANC has already acted as well to write to chairpersons and secretaries of provinces to remind them of the responsibilities that we all carry. When you see the leadership of the ANC, all of us doing all of this, it means that we are united and are acting at one in terms of what we need to see happening on the ground.
President Cyril Ramaphosa in the letter speaks about dipping our heads in shame, and we need to humble ourselves before our people. It's really concerning times. South Africans really, you've seen that hashtag, probably interacted with it, that comes out every Friday, a derogatory hashtag towards the African National Congress. Do these developments concern you?
Well, they do concern us. Just on the hashtag, we have been able to establish that most of those hashtags are effectively disseminated through bots by some in the opposition who could not defeat the African National Congress at the polls, who are now using the growing social media network to be able to undermine the good work that the African National Congress is doing. Of course, we are the first to acknowledge where there are wrongs in our own organization. We self-correct. You know, earlier on, I was being asked that, but for the past 26 years, the ANC keeps on self-correcting. I had to remind the journalist that 26 years ago, I was only 14 years old. 26 years on, I'm 40 years old and in the leadership of the African National Congress. Now, 26 years ago, the ANC was led by President Nelson Mandela. 26 years on, the ANC is being led by President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, a self-respecting organization like ours, from time to time, need to self-correct. It needs to then say, are we still on the right path? Are we doing the things that we have promised our people? Are we ensuring that we protect the rights of our people? Our people do not see those in leadership positions enjoying extraordinary privileges than them. Are we able to uphold ethical leadership well within our ranks? What are the things that we are doing? Can we rightfully say we are self-correcting, both in actions and in deeds?
So, Mr. Mabe, those presumed members who already are involved in corrupt activities, do we expect them to just turn around and switch just on the basis of this letter and stop conducting corrupt activities, especially if they're benefiting from these practices?
Well, malicious benefit, where they are discovered or uncovered to be, we have made a call to our members that should they know someone within our ranks who is openly involved in corrupt activities, rigging of the tender system, nepotism, and all of that, they must report such to law enforcement agencies. Remember, the ANC can only articulate these policy positions and expect that their own members will be able to do the right things. But we are not going to be able to do this work alone. We expect our members themselves to also act in the right way. Not only that, we also expect law enforcement agencies to take decisive steps against those found to be in the wrong. We must commend law enforcement agencies where they have been taking action. I mean, you would have seen that just in the past week, there's been quite a number of cases that were being held out in the courts of law that involved senior government officials who would have been part of a supply chain. These scenes are encouraging. The fact that when we heard of 14 councillors who were involved in the rigging of the distribution of food parcels, we immediately acted to expel those. This shows decisive action. When there was a councillor out in Mpumalanga who was found to be selling work permits to foreign nationals just at the start of the lockdown, we did not waste time. We removed such a member from our ranks. We summarily suspended them. This is the action that the ANC can take. But there are certain issues that require prosecutorial authorities, law enforcement agencies to be able to act. Where there's crime, where there are acts of fraud proven so, we expect that the sentences should be meted against such individuals so that we could also give credence to our law enforcement agencies and ensure our people that the fight against corruption is not just left in the hands of the African National Congress. It is left to all South Africans. It is a task and a duty that all South Africans must perform.
But there's also a sense that there are holy cows, people who will never be touched, no matter their involvement in corruption. How can you assure ANC members that this audit process that you say is not a personal process? I don't understand how that works, because you're supposed to actually identify individuals who are conducting corrupt practices. How can you assure ANC members that everybody will be looked at without exception?
Well, when the ANC acts, it does so without fear or favor. We have entrusted officials of this is unprecedented. We have entrusted officials to carry on with that task. The fact that they have moved with the necessary speed is quite encouraging. There are not going to be any holy cows. No. If there are instances of corruption proven or so, the ANC is going to act decisively. You would also appreciate this, Desiree, and this is the point that we have made earlier on, that members of the African National Congress themselves enjoy rights like any other South African. That is why it is important that an engagement is held, undertaken by our own national officials, to make sure that when we do all of these things and a report is ultimately submitted to the National Executive Committee, there is a fair and clear understanding on the kind of a direction that the organization ought to be taking.
So what's the way forward now?
The way forward is that officials are undertaking that work. As soon as they are done with their work, they will be able to report to the National Executive Committee as expected. We've outlined this point out in the statement that we issued when we concluded our own National Executive Committee. The same points are being reiterated in the letter by the President to members of the African National Congress. I can tell you now, and viewers of the South African Broadcasting Corporation, that the ANC leadership is at one in terms of what needs to happen going forward.
Pule Mabe is the national spokesperson for the African National Congress. Let's take a break as we chase the top of the next hour.